Welcome to the deep dive. We're skipping the surface stuff today and getting right into the real mechanics of how multi-million-dollar investments actually happen, our mission. To decode what it really takes for these massive, complex projects, the kind that, reshape entire regions to get the green light to secure funding from a major development bank.
And we've got the perfect guide for this. We're using the Investment Bank of Africa's, the IBA's Project Bankability Checklist. It's hot off the press, basically. Published May 2025. So if you're prepping a major funding application, or frankly, if you just need to understand what the gold standard looks like in development finance, well, this checklist is pretty much it.
Okay, let's unpack this then, especially for anyone out there who needs a, let's say, quick but really solid understanding of how these huge projects get financed. And we're talking about projects built not just for profit, right, but for progress, for development.
Absolutely. And the IBA's whole perspective, their regional scope, immediately sets the stage. I mean, think about where they operate. Headquarters in Gaborone, Botswana, but then key regional offices in places like Dakar, Senegal, and Johannesburg, South Africa. This isn't your local high street bank. It's an institution focused on Pan-African development. And that means their very first requirement.
Yeah.
Well, it's different from your typical commercial lender.
Which gets us right to that first hurdle on their list. Okay, before we even think about spreadsheets and numbers, what's the project's core purpose? What's it trying to achieve?
Right. It's criterion 1, project identification and alignment. The fundamental question the IBA asks is, does this project actually align with regional goals? See, commercial finance usually asks, will this make money? Development finance asks something more like, will this advance a national or maybe a regional strategic mandate? That difference is, well, it's critical.
So you can't just show up with a brilliant, potentially profitable idea for, say, a new port or a power plant. You've got to demonstrate how it fits into the bigger picture, like the developmental framework that's maybe been set by the region itself or maybe bodies like the African Union.
Precisely. The project needs a clear mission that serves the collective good, you could say. And to prove that mission isn't just wishful thinking, that is grounded in reality, the IBA demands the first big piece of paper. Has a full feasibility study been done? This study basically validates the core concept, that the market's there, the resources are available, and the whole project idea is actually physically and economically sound, at least on paper. It's the foundation.
Okay, so the mission aligns, the concept seems feasible. Next up, I'm guessing, is the legal side, the sort of ultimate gatekeeper. What's next after alignment?
That takes us straight to criterion 2. Legal and regulatory compliance. This is where the bank makes absolutely sure the project isn't going to hit some massive legal iceberg later on. They look for the non-negotiables. Are all the necessary permits already obtained? Or, at the very least, are they clearly in process with a defined path to getting them?
Yeah, we hear about big infrastructure projects getting stuck for years because of regulatory issues or local opposition, so nailing this down early must save a world of pain later.
It absolutely does. But what's particularly important for the IBA, what they really hammer on, is environmental compliance. And this isn't just about, getting a permit to build something. It's about ensuring full compliance with both international and national environmental standards. If that environmental legal piece isn't totally solid right now, the whole proposal could be dead in the water. It's basically a pass-fail test to minimize the bank's exposure to environmental liability down the line.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, the IBA just can't afford to back projects that end up causing long-term environmental damage or get tangled in legal battles. Secure the legal ground before the financial ground.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for a lot of people. Let's pivot a bit and talk hard numbers. Because even with the best intentions, the cleanest legal slate, the money has to work out. The project has to stack up financially.
And this brings us to the third pillar, financial viability. The bank needs solid assurance that this huge investment, these millions of dollars, will actually generate value over its often very long life cycle, which means, no back-of-the-envelope calculations allowed here.
Right. So what's the key deliverable they need, the document that sort of summarizes the whole projected financial life of this asset?
They require the availability of a detailed financial model. And I mean detailed. This isn't just a basic budget. It's a really complex, multi-layered projection. It covers operating costs, revenues, debt servicing, taxes, inflation. Usually for the entire life of the project, maybe 20, even 30 years out. Wow. Okay, that sounds like a massive piece of work in itself. And that model, presumably, has to generate the two classic metrics every big investor scrutinizes, IRR and NPV.
Exactly. The financial model's output must confirm that the projected IRR, The internal rate of return and the MPV net present value have been calculated, and crucially, that they meet the bank's thresholds. The IRR tells the IBA the expected annualized return on their investment. Super important for comparing this project against, well, any other investment opportunity they might have globally.
And the NPV, why is that just as critical alongside the IRR?
Well, the net present value essentially translates all those future cash flows back into today's money. It shows the project's net value right now. It confirms that even after accounting for the time value of money and risk, the project is genuinely creating wealth. For big infrastructure, with massive upfront costs, the NPV is vital. It proves the long-term cash generation really justifies that initial spend, especially when we might be facing significant market uncertainty.
Got it. So the detailed model shows it works on paper, financially viable. But, as they say, paper viability doesn't mean much if you can't actually build the thing. Which brings us, I guess, to the next criterion, moving from numbers to, the physical reality.
Spot on. That's criterion 4, technical readiness. Here, the bank moves beyond just the theoretical potential. They need proof that the project is actually ready to go, ready for execution. First question, is the technical blueprint available? They need to review the engineering designs, the bill of materials, the specs, making sure the proposed technology is appropriate, feasible, and suitable for the local context.
And critically, who's going to build it? They need to know who's actually guaranteeing that blueprint will become reality. They're looking for specific partners, right?
Exactly. They need identified execution partners. The checklist specifically asks, are EPC partners, that's engineering, procurement, and construction firms identified? Are they locked in, or at least in the final stages of negotiation? The bank needs assurance that the team handling the actual construction is reputable, experienced, and capable of delivering this asset on time and, crucially, on budget. Construction delays can absolutely wreck financial models, so locking in that technical capability is non-negotiable for bankability.
That does create an interesting dynamic, doesn't it? You've got the financial model potentially showing great returns, that's criterion 3, but the quality and reliability of the team actually running the show, criterion 4, is just as vital, which naturally leads us to the people behind the project itself, the sponsors.
Indeed, projects are really only as good as the sponsors driving them. So now we move to the sponsor profile. This is criterion 5, and it's all about credibility, about trust.
So the obvious question is the sponsor experienced? Do they have a track record? But how does the bank really verify that? How do they know the experience is genuine and reliable?
Well, this links back nicely to what you just said about the tension between projected potential, like the IRR and C3, and proven reliability. While the bank is definitely looking at those future projections, the IRR, the NPV, they simultaneously demand that audited financials are available for the sponsoring company or entity itself. See, credibility isn't built on forecasts. It's built on a verifiable history of performance.
That's a really smart double check, isn't it? The bank's essentially saying, okay, we see your project could generate this return, but only if you, the entity asking for our money, have a proven track record of managing your own finances successfully and delivering results in the past.
Precisely that.
Yeah.
They need to see evidence of solid financial management, of accountability. If the sponsor's own historical audited statements look shaky or, poorly managed, that throws up immediate red flags no matter how fantastic the new project's IRR might seem on paper. It's about minimizing moral hazard and ensuring there's institutional stability behind the whole venture.
Okay, so sponsor credibility is checked. Now, what about their responsibility, not just financially, but to the community, the region? This feels like where the IBA really shows its development focus again, moving beyond just ticking legal boxes into actual positive impact.
Exactly. That brings us neatly to criterion 6, social and environmental impact. Now remember, criterion 2 was about basic compliance, essentially, staying out of legal trouble, especially environmentally. Criterion 6 goes further. It's about maximizing the developmental benefits. It's less about legality and more about desirability from a development perspective.
Okay, so what specific benefits are they looking for? What does the checklist ask for here?
They focus heavily on things you can actually measure, or at least clearly demonstrate. Think. Creation of local jobs. That's a big one. And broader community benefits. Does the project have local content requirements built in? Will it involve training local staff? Will it improve access to essential services like power or water? A project might be profitable, but if it doesn't generate significant local employment or demonstrably improve quality of life, it could actually fail this critical test for the IBA.
And is there a formal document required here, something comprehensive to verify this projected positive impact, kind of like how the feasibility study backs up the initial concept?
Yes, there is. They require verification that an ESIA, that's an environmental and social impact assessment, has been conducted. An ECI is usually a huge piece of work. It maps out all the project's potential interactions with the entire human and natural environment, often over its whole lifespan. It provides that deeper assurance that the project isn't just legally compliant, back to C2, but it's also designed to be socially beneficial and environmentally sustainable in the long run.
Right. Okay, we've established a project that aligns regionally, is legally sound, financially viable, technically ready, backed by credible sponsors, and designed for positive social impact. Phew. The next logical step for any lender, especially with this kind of money involved, has got to be risk, right? What could go wrong?
Absolutely. Always. No multi-million-dollar project comes without significant risks. So Criterion 7 zeroes in on risk mitigation. The bank needs to see proof of foresight. They need to know the sponsors have thought through the potential pitfalls.
Which means having a formal plan for when, not if, things inevitably go sideways at some point.
Exactly. It requires that a robust risk matrix is available. And this isn't just like a vague list of worries. It has to be a structured document. It identifies specific risks, think political risk, currency fluctuations, operational failures, even force majeure events, and it tries to quantify their likelihood and potential impact. But, maybe even more importantly, it must clearly outline the specific mitigation strategies planned for each major risk. How will you handle it if X happens?
Okay, so planning for risk is one thing, but what about actual protection? What concrete measures are demanded to put a sort of financial firewall between the bank and a potential catastrophic failure?
That's the safety net part. The checklist asks pointedly, are guarantees or insurance included? This could be a range of things. Maybe sovereign guarantees from the host government, maybe comprehensive political risk insurance policies from specialized providers, or perhaps performance bonds from the contractors. Whatever the instrument, it reinforces that the bank needs to know its financial exposure is actively managed and protected by external mechanisms designed to absorb the shock if things go really wrong.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the eighth criterion. And it's one that maybe gets overlooked sometimes in the excitement of launching a big project. The exit strategy. Seems the IBA isn't just focused on the start, they're already thinking about the end of the line.
Full cycle thinking is absolutely central to development finance. So Criterion 8 demands end goal clarity. Is the exit clearly defined? This covers how the loan gets repaid, yes, but also things like the potential for transferring ownership to local entities down the road, or the mechanisms for refinancing the project once it's operational and de-risked.
And what about the really long-term stewardship? You know, what happens after the project is up and running, maybe decades later, when the initial construction crews and financiers are long gone?
That's covered by the second part of C8, ensuring that life cycle cost planning is complete. This is so critical for sustainability. It involves planning for ongoing maintenance, for major component replacements years or decades out, and even for eventual decommissioning at the very end of the asset's useful life. It ensures the project doesn't become a white elephant, a burden on the regional economy years down the line after the initial sponsors have moved on. It's about guaranteeing accountability and viability across the entire lifespan.
Wow, okay. This has been a genuinely fascinating look under the hood of development finance machinery. We've walked through the 8 core pillars the Investment Bank of Africa uses to vet these huge projects. Starting with aligning to regional goals, ensuring rock-solid legal and environmental standing, then confirming the financial viability and technical readiness, checking the sponsor's credibility, maximizing the social and environmental benefits, actively mitigating risks, and finally planning the entire life cycle right through to the exit.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, these 8 steps really demonstrate how institutions like the IBA operate on that dual mandate we talked about. They're clearly focused on financial return. They need to see that IRR and NPV, but it's interwoven with this rigorous approach to long-term sustainability, genuine developmental impact, and very careful risk management baked into every single phase. And just to ground this geographically again for everyone, the IBA is headquartered in Gaborone, Botswana, with those key regional offices we mentioned in Dakar, Senegal, and Johannesburg, South Africa. So what does this all mean? We've highlighted this really interesting dual requirement from the IBA. They demand both projected financial returns, the forward-looking IRR and NPV, showing the project's potential, and backward-looking audited historical financials from the sponsor, proving past reliability. What underlying message does that send about the IBA's priorities, how they balance that ambitious future growth against foundational trustworthiness? It really tells us that, certainly in development finance, the reliability of the hands holding the investment
is considered just as crucial as the potential brilliance of the investment itself. Definitely something for you to mull over as you look at your next major project proposal.